Consciousness is not something exclusively from the brain. Let's start with a question: how do we make it plausible that consciousness is not something from the brain, but meaning itself, beyond time and space?
What does the science of biosemiotics have to say about this? First, what biosemiotics really says, beneath the jargon. Biosemiotics starts from one radical premise: life does not react to reality, it interprets reality. Every living system detects differences, assigns meaning to those differences, acts as if that meaning matters. That alone already kills the idea that the brain produces consciousness the way a liver produces bile. Biosemiotics gives us the scientific wedge. 1. Meaning precedes brains. Bacteria interpret chemical gradients, plants interpret light direction, cells interpret internal stress signals.
No cortex required.
If meaning requires a brain, life shouldn't work.
2. Brains don't create meaning, they modulate it.
The brain is better understood as a translator, a constraint system, a local interface. Just like a radio does not create music, a modem does not create the internet. The field of meaning already exists.
3. Consciousness equals semiotic coherence across scales. This is where it clicks perfectly.
Biosemiotics quietly implies consciousness is the capacity of a system to participate in meaning making. Not awareness, thoughts, identity,
but interpretation itself.
Which means, consciousness is not located, consciousness is not timed, consciousness is not bounded by bodies.
Bodies are interfaces, not origins. Now let's align this with our work.
We already say, consciousness is the meaning we give to perceived reality, beyond time and space, through connection. Biosemiotics reframes that into something science can't easily dismiss. Replace, consciousness is produced by neurons with, consciousness is a distributed semiotic field, locally constrained by biological interfaces. Our reset meaning evaluation model? That's biosemiotics with a nervous system map added.
What we call the solar plexus, or emotional energy body, or emotional brain becomes
a meaning integration node, not emotional chaos, but semiotic gravity. Emotion equals meaning with charge. Trauma equals frozen meaning. Healing equals resignification.
That's straight biosemiotic logic.
The time-space issue.
We have stated before that emotions appear, apart from time and space.
Emotions depend on the memory charge in our formula, and memories pop up in our mind with the same charge as they had when the memorized event happened.
Thus memories, and subsequently emotions, are not depending on time and space, their charge remains the same.
Hence, meaning given to any experience or observation is memory-based and, therefore, it does not exist in time, it only manifests through time. A stop sign means stop, before you see it, while you see it, after you remember it.
Meaning is atemporal, interpretation is temporal.
So consciousness isn't inside spacetime, it interfaces with spacetime.
Let's reframe our question. The original question was, where does consciousness come from?
Let's put it differently, how does meaning stabilize into experience? We understand that talking about the solar plexus as the emotional energy body may be woo or too esoteric.
What we call the solar plexus singularity, Bessel van der Kolk for instance, calls the emotional brain.
Biosemiotics gives us the translation layer that lets both exist without fighting physics.
Let me tighten this. 1. Why the solar plexus model gets rejected, and how to bypass that.
Solar plexus singularity
will be flagged as non-scientific. Not because it's wrong, but because it's top-down metaphysics.
Science prefers bottom-up descriptions, observable, measurable, inferable.
So the move is not to defend the location, but the function.
Functionally, what we describe is rapid, pre-verbal meaning appraisal, safety, threat evaluation, emotional coherence or fragmentation, behavior priming before cognition. That is exactly what the limbic system, vagal networks, enteric nervous system, hormonal signaling, already describe, just without naming meaning itself. Biosemiotics lets us say, I'm not proposing a mystical center, I'm describing a meaning integration function that biology already performed.
2.
Biosemiotics plus electromagnetic field as collective experience container equals collective meaning without mysticism. Here's the key synthesis: can biosemiotics connect collective emotions, collective meaning, and collective behavior beyond humans?
Yes, we like to think so, if we phrase it correctly.
Biosemiotics already asserts meaning is not human exclusive.
Interpretation exists at all life levels. Communication does not equal language. Signals does not equal information unless interpreted.
A tree does not think, but it interprets light gradients, fungal signals, stress hormones from neighboring trees. Interpretation equals proto-conscious participation.
3.
Where the EM field fits, let's put it carefully. Scientifically defensible framing: the EM field is a medium of coordination, not origin. Just like air carries sound, water carries waves and currents, neural tissue carries spikes. EM fields synchronize biological rhythms, enable rapid non-local coordination, influence coherence versus chaos.
Meaning still arises through interpretation, not physics alone.
So, biosemiotics equals meaning logic. EM field equals coupling medium. Nervous systems equals local amplifiers. 4. Collective emotion leads to collective meaning, leads to collective behavior.
Now we hit our real question.
Step by step, individual organisms interpret signals: threat, safety, opportunity. These interpretations generate emotional charge, arousal, contraction, openness. Emotional states influence signal emission, posture, hormones, voice, behavior, electrical activity. Signals are picked up by others via perception, resonance, nervous systems, fields. Shared interpretations stabilize: this is dangerous, this is safe, this is who we are.
That stabilization equals collective meaning. Repeated meaning equals collective identity.
Identity drives collective behavior. This works for human crowds, animal herds, forests, ecosystems.
Different resolution, same principle.
Brains equals high-resolution interfaces.
No magic. No reductionism. 5.
Trauma is frozen collective meaning. This is the quiet killer insight.
This is where our work quietly outpaces mainstream trauma theory. Individual trauma, meaning locked in unsafe interpretation. Collective trauma, shared meaning frozen across generations.
Biosemiotics allows us to say, trauma is not stored only in brains, it is stored in interpretive patterns. Which explains epigenetics, cultural fear loops, inherited mistrust, mass behavior under threat.
No woo. No denial of biology.
Organisms share meaning through distributed interpretive networks. Electromagnetic coupling contributes to biological coherence. Meaning is not temporally bound, though its expressions are.
Consciousness does not equal self-reflection. Consciousness equals capacity to interpret and respond meaningfully.
For example, a tree doesn't think about drought, it interprets water scarcity and reorganizes behavior. That already qualifies as minimal consciousness in biosemiotics.
All this points to one thing: meaning is not owned by humans. Humans are high-resolution participants in a meaning-saturated world. Consciousness is not an on-off switch, a possession, a brain byproduct. It is a continuum of interpretive depth.
Bacteria interpret chemical meaning, plants interpret environmental meaning, animals interpret emotional meaning, humans interpret symbolic meaning.
Same process, different resolution. Why this does not contradict physics?
Physics describes forces, particles, fields. Biosemiotics describes what systems do with those forces.
No contradiction.
Physics equals syntax, biosemiotics equals semantic. You don't reject grammar by studying literature.
Now, collective trauma as an ecological meaning loop.
Core premise: biosemiotic, not metaphysical. Trauma is meaning frozen into an ecosystem's interpretive patterns.
Not just in humans. Not just in brains. But across interacting living systems. Step 1. Trauma begins as signal overload.
Whether individual or collective, trauma always starts here: war, famine, environmental collapse, abuse, mass fear. Biologically, this means excess stress hormones, alarm signaling, defensive behaviors, survival prioritization. In biosemiotic terms, the system interprets reality as unsafe.
This interpretation becomes dominant.
Step 2. Meaning shifts from growth to survival. Here's the crucial move most psychology stops short of. When a system interprets danger as chronic, flexibility collapses, exploration shuts down, redundancy is favored, novelty is rejected. This is true for human nervous systems, animal populations, forests under stress, microbial ecosystems.
Meaning narrows. What keeps us alive? Replaces what allows us to thrive? That is trauma in plain sight.
Step 3. Trauma propagates through shared signaling.
This is where the collective part enters.
Trauma doesn't stay local because stress signals are communicative, organisms co-regulate, interpretation is contagious. Examples: frightened humans amplify fear in groups, stressed trees warn neighboring trees, animals alter migration and reproduction, soil microbiomes change composition.
No one chooses this.
Shared meaning emerges automatically. This is exactly what Bessel van der Kolk points to psychologically, but biosemiotics extends it ecologically. Step 4. Meaning stabilizes into identity.
Here's the point of no return if nothing interrupts the loop.
Repeated interpretation becomes identity. We are unsafe, the world is hostile, resources are scarce, trust is dangerous. For humans, culture, belief systems, power hierarchy. For ecosystems, altered species dominance, reduced biodiversity, rigid seasonal patterns. Trauma becomes who the system thinks it is.
Step 5. Identity drives behavior that confirms the trauma. This is the self-sealing loop.
Fear-based identity produces hoarding, aggression, control, domination. Extraction, which damages ecosystems, increases scarcity, reinforces fear.
The system creates the evidence for its own belief.
This is true for traumatized families, traumatized societies, traumatized landscapes.
Same loop. Different scale.
Step 6. Why ecosystems sometimes heal us anyway. Even in trauma loops, life still seeks coherence, systems attempt rebalancing, new meanings can emerge. Medicinal plants that start to grow near waste sites happen because disturbed systems select for regulation, healing properties are adaptive advantages, balance is favored over collapse.
Nature doesn't forgive. It re-signifies.
The full ecological trauma loop. One sentence: collective trauma is a persistent interpretation of unsafety that propagates through shared signaling, stabilizes into identity, and reproduces itself through behavior, across humans, animals, plants, and environment.
No consciousness mysticism required. No brain exclusivity required. Where healing actually enters the loop, this is the hopeful and dangerous part.
Healing does not start with new information, new rules, new leaders.
It starts when interpretation changes.
A system must experience safety without domination, regulation without control, connection without cost. That's why trauma is relational, healing is relational, coercion never works long term.
Why this matters: we're not just talking about psychology.
We're talking about why societies repeat violence, why ecosystems collapse under fear, why control-based systems always fail, why healing must be systemic, not heroic.
And why meaning, not matter, is the real lever for change. This calls for a meaningful reset.